Me personally, I lay much of the blame at the feet of the students. A lecturer discussed Mark Twain's 19th century novel Huckleberry Finn. It is a text where the N-word is mentioned over 200 times. Some students of colour objected to the lecturer's prolonged usage of the N-word, but their objections were dismissed. The lecturer explained to the students that she would continue to use the N-word because it is mentioned in the text. She went on to explain that it would be facile and historically inaccurate to discuss these texts without using the language of that period. Seeing that the lecturer showed little regard for their pleas, the students rushed to the office of a young lecturer named Mark. Despite his short time in the English department, Mark was very popular with the student body, mostly the students of colour, because he was just one of 2 black lecturers in the department. Filled with emotion and anguish, the students explained what happened in the class and expressed their hurt and pain about how the lecturer treated them. What hurt them most was that the lecturer did not consider their objections. Hearing all this commotion in the hallway, Simon, another lecturer, came out of his office. He waited for the students to leave so that he could have a private discussion with Mark. Simon was an older lecturer. He had been in the English department for many years. Like a war veteran, he had seen all this before. He detected that the students had infused Mark to take some type of action. So he tried his best to calm down Mark. He advised him to think carefully about his next steps. He knew it would be easy for Mark to be depicted as the aggressor and the lecturer as the damsel in distress. So he advised him to tread carefully. But at that point, it was too late. The students had put a battery in Mark's back. Weeks later, I met with Simon and I mentioned that I haven't seen Mark in a while. How is he settling in? Simon replied that he was unceremoniously let go. Apparently, after their conversation, Mark went straight to the lecturer's office to confront her about the way that she had treated the students. He was expecting to confront a strong, emboldened, and unwavering colleague, but instead found a bewildered, genteel, and delicate victim. Before he realized that the switch had taken place, she was reduced to tears. As soon as I heard that part of the story, I knew his fate was sealed. No justification is louder than bourgeois women's tears. I can imagine the fear that Mark felt when he saw that first droplet of water leave her eyes and make its way down her cheeks. What have I done? My response to Simon's revelation was a muted, okay, then we continue to talk about our research project. From an outsider looking in, it would appear that we were uncaring about the situation. It's not that. We were conditioned for such events. We have long seen people of colour quietly removed from the public space because they were deemed threatening. But more importantly, it was part of our self-preservation. We only had a finite amount of stress that we were willing to bear. As being the only ones in our departments, we already had enough on our plate without taking on somebody else's trauma, especially if they refused counsel. Just like those old war movies. As our comrades fell, we couldn't look back. We had to carry on the good fight. Who was to blame? The university? Of course. It is predictable who the university will protect and who it will neglect. Phipps observed that the damsel in distress evokes a protective response from institutions, and the colonial archetypes of people of colour as aggressive and frightening come into play. Let us be very clear. Institutions of higher education emblematically represent privilege, so it will always be on the side of privilege. Akapadi invites us to consider a fish that must swim upstream versus a fish that swims with the current. Arguably, both fish could survive, but under what circumstances? Would one fish benefit from the flow of the current? It would seem so. The lecturer, so strong and assertive with the students, but the complete opposite with Mark. From what was reported, Mark did not threaten or insult the lecturer. There was no reason for the lecturer to be afraid. Nonetheless, a critical question is, did she know where her tears would lead? Did she know the power of her tears? Mark, his naivety played a role in his demise. Perhaps he assumed that the institution viewed him and the lecturer as equal and would treat them as such. Also, perhaps he ignored Simon's advice because he suspected that Simon was part of the problem. Simon was just another cog in the machine, deterring him from action. Simon was here for all these years, being complicit in the systematic silencing of people of colour, and did nothing. Me personally, I lay much of the blame at the feet of the students. Rushing to Mark's door compelled him to act on their behalf. They could have gone anywhere, but they chose to charge this young man with the responsibility to challenge the academy. The pressure to live up to their expectations must have been heavy on Mark's chest. He couldn't say no. If he refused to pursue it, how would they have viewed him? Would they have given him grace? Of all the people, students of colour should appreciate the pressures of a black academic. He is trapped in the middle. He has pressure from above, coming from the academy. He has to deal with microaggressions, combating stereotypes, walking the line, and now pressure from below, coming from the students who want him to live up to their expectations. Instead of keeping him afloat, they weighed him down with further responsibilities. Then again, where else could the students go? I have seen the complaint process in many universities turn how the complaint was articulated into an issue above and beyond the actual complaint. I've seen the students start with a complaint and finish with a reprimand for their conduct. How can I blame people who are powerless for seeking whatever means are available to them?